Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Bleep. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and being here and listening to the stories of the guests that I have on each week. I know I say this every week, it's a special guest, but Caroline is near and dear to my heart because I have gone to see her numerous times as a medium. And she also, though, is an intuit. She is a spiritual coach, and she is just a gifted visionary. And I have been to her many, many times to help me in different times along my life path. And so it is such a great honor to have you with us today, Caroline. And Caroline's full name is Caroline Kapoza Probert, and she has recently gone out on her own. She was with Leaping Lizards for a long time in Freeport. So we will have all of her information in the show notes for any of you who want to hire Caroline as a coach or a medium in the future. So thank you and welcome.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Wow. Now I have to meet those standards, I hope.
Well, it's very timely. I asked Carolyn if she would be a guest on our show because of the intensity of what is happening in our world, and really wanted to tap into Caroline's wisdom because, of course, with these recordings, and it is a podcast that people will be listening to this for years to come. But to mark time, we found out just yesterday that Roe versus Wade has been overturned. And I know that there is a tremendous amount of fear in the world. And I thought now is the time, Caroline, that I think that we really need your wisdom and your light, and to have this really hard conversation about what's happening in the world. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. Honestly, it's an honor just to sit with you and to be chosen to be part of your podcast and your journey.
Well, thank you. Can you, before we really jump into the heart of our conversation, can you
Sure.
just talk a little bit about you and your work and what it means to be a spiritual intuit, a guide, a medium, etc., for those listeners who may not quite understand what I mean by those terms?
Sure. I think when we talk in terms of experience, it's not something common that people attach to. When we think of any kind of spiritual intuition or anything like that, it's sort of that unknown, and we want to attach more to the known. And for me, since I came into this world in this lifetime, I've been able to observe and see physically and in spirit all different sorts of activity, whether it's people or whether it's things or events ahead of time, events from the past, things that, maybe we don't necessarily want to discuss, but they're all there to be revealed, to be released, and to be healed from and move forward, to accept that we're all a portion of the whole experience of life. And we separate ourselves in so much suffering and hidden fear and neglect and shame. And, we don't benefit from exposing ourselves to what we're afraid of, or what is not seen, or what we don't know. Instead, we want to shelf it, and it becomes almost like a wall. I always say it's like you're building a concrete wall around your heart. And what you can't separate the heart and the mind. It has to be connected in spirit. I am, therefore I am. You're saying you're one in the whole. You're part of it all. You're part of the creation of God, and everyone else along, we're all the same. So we need guidance on fulfilling purpose through understanding our history and facing all our fear.
Yeah. So talk to us about how your gift works. When you're sitting with somebody, how does it work? Do you see symbols? Do you hear voices? Is it more sensate? Talk to us about what your gift looks like.
Sure. I always say it's in the language of the individual. And for that person to understand and really embrace, really trust and know with all their heart that what is being said is true. It's almost like you kind of like charge your heart open again, and you're refreshed back into the world, plugged back into the creator. And now you have like a new vision and a new understanding, and feel like, yeah, there's no blocks before me. I can do this. I can accomplish things. Okay, this person's okay now, or there are answers from that person with validation. So sometimes it's symbols and numbers, but more often it's speaking to those who have gone before us or our spirit guides, the ones who watch over us in this lifetime, angelics, higher beings, all of them. They're all there in the unseen, which is really the reality, but we have to just, guide ourselves back into waking up to that. So I think when someone really receives information that is opening up their concept to, okay, God's real, everyone is protected and connected down here, and there is a greater purpose for me being here, even if I'm not accomplishing what I think I'm supposed to. And then that's the breakdown of the shame and, all of that stuff, and facing our greatest fears, which some clients, are being led to do and have worked with for many years, that what's the worst, greatest fear, and working through it.
So that's a beautiful segue into what is happening in our world right now. There is a tremendous amount of fear. My girlfriends have called me what this means for us in our world right now with the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and people are terrified. People have been scared, right? I mean, without getting deep into politics,
Right.
because that is not my jam, but I know that there was a ton of fear when Trump became president, and now we have a lot of fearful people and people in our gay and lesbian world. This is very big, what is happening, what just happened.
Right.
And I also have a deep belief that love is truly the only thing that can actually heal. And the more fear we put into the world, the more destruction happens, right? Like our fear manifests more fear.
Right.
But I really would love to hear from you of putting some context, spiritual context around what is going on in our world. Because, again, this podcast around grief and loss, there is tremendous grief and loss with this new reality that we're facing.
I'm hearing, again, having young people in this generation and my own children, it's a lot of a feeling of, your power and control being stolen. Not even just taking power and control, it's stealing rights. And again, through power and control. The concern, it's so strong intuitively, is a really strong, and probably backlash for me for this, but it's what I feel. And everybody knows I say what I say. I won't candy coat things because it's not necessary. And to be direct is to be clear and honest. And that's how we can all benefit from moving forward in all aspects of our lives. And there's a religious coding on this that's really playing big into this subject, into this situation. I've heard already a lot around the religious aspect of it. And there's a huge moving force of like a spiritual movement of, we all know what the whole concept is of, taking someone's life, or, it doesn't matter. Maybe it was supposed to be that way. The speaking for God, which blows my mind because none of us can fathom God. So how do we speak for God? This creator that lives in everything is not a part of a yes and a no. It just is.
Or black and white. There are no absolutes.
No. So I think it's more, well, I feel strongly it's more fear-based. And there is a lot of religious coding on this for me.
And so when you talk about a religious coding, what do you mean?
Well, there's a lot, again, I'm seeing this, we're all seeing this rise in the concept of Christianity and what that means. And if we break it right down, to what is that? And Christianity was created by the people, not by Christ himself, not Jesus, not Yeshua, what I say, the rock star, who, didn't believe in religion, anything structured in this aspect. So I feel like there's a big movement. We're in a shift right now. We're in an energetic shift where the patriarchal power from eons ago is now in the breakdown. And that's complex in itself, without getting into everything. It's a balance of the male and the female aspect coming back into equality and balance. And that's it. And this extreme will have to kind of be the cataclysmic explosion for the balance, in other words, because this is a crazy over the top extreme. It is trying to harness or steal power, like these guys are saying, these younger generations. It's not, it's not allowed. It's not allowed. I keep hearing they can't do that. It's not allowed. So it's going to take that breakdown.
So what do we do when you talk about the breakdown? Because as I said, people are crying, people are grieving, people are scared. And, and those who have young daughters, what do we do with this? What do we do with this profound grief? What do we do with this profound fear? Because for me, I'm like, okay, guys, let's rise up and reclaim our power. But what does it mean for us?
I think it's most important not to identify it personally. And if we do that, if we identify it personally, then we've reduced it. We reduced the gift of change from that I or ego perspective. The anger comes from, or the frustration comes from the ego,
Yeah.
I won't allow, can't accept. And it's about witnessing something on a greater scale. And that's going to be what helps to kind of quell this and bring balance back. If we stand as witness, even if we're angry and it's a right-minded anger, from witness, not from the I place. And there's a lot of confusion in the I,
But I can imagine a lot of listeners are like, okay, so what do I do? Do I do nothing? Do I stand by and observe? Like, what does it mean? Like my girlfriend this morning said, we've got to vote. People can't be complacent anymore. We have to make sure we're voting. So
right. That's huge too, right? Not ignoring it. This is an opportunity for everybody to come out of their own home or their observed safety zone. It's like where everyone else matters. This is an opportunity to rise up as a collective instead of an individual. We're coming together. Not I'm coming. And no one wants to be in these days inconvenienced, from the guy avoiding helping a woman and a child with jump starting her car, which I witnessed and couldn't believe it, several people, because she was unsightly. Things like it's the I, me, and I have to, and I'm going to ignore. This is important. I'm important. And it's no longer serving us. We have to come together as a larger group of people, as a witness, and it has to be based in a higher love and understanding. This person doesn't understand what they're doing. So we have to move forward together to kind of absorb that and change it.
And and I know people, my listeners know that I talk about love a lot because I really think we are either coming from love or fear, right? I mean, really, those are the two places we come from. Fear can look like anger, destruction. It can be debilitating, depression, sadness, whatever. And I'm not saying that, of course, this is outside of, there are true mental health issues. And so I don't really want to confuse those two things. But, when I think about sometimes it takes that anger or that waking up in order for us to actually become involved in our lives and care about what is happening outside of the I. Like, for example, my husband said last night, well, you don't have to worry about it, Susan. I mean, the states get to decide about abortion, etc. And I said, this isn't about me in Maine. This is about us as a country. I mean, this doesn't affect me. I'm a 55-year-old woman. I'm not going to get pregnant. This has nothing to do with me. That's what I said. This has nothing to do with me. This is about us. This is about our world. This is about human beings and choice. And that's how I think about these cataclysmic things that happen. It's a nudge of wake up, people, right? Wake up. This is about all of us. And how do we create change from a place of love and kindness and compassion and gentleness?
And that's that old native proverb, great strength comes from grace, and that's it. It's that simple being graceful in power and not exerting it as this big,
oppression.
Yes, exactly. Suppression, oppression. And that's what's happening. But I really strongly feel with how things have been building up energetically, because you can feel it. You have, my God, this mass group of people now becoming depressed. The mental illness that's coming forth is mind blowing. And friends of mine who are therapists, everybody's burning out. A lot of people, because they're doing the Zoom meetings with their clients. And a lot of people have a hard time with that because they're not, in presence. And I'm just like, so what's going on? What's going on? but it's the buildup. Energetically, we're all feeling this. This earth is holding energy for us. And if we're polluting it, I say, why recycle then? If you're going to pollute the very air we breathe by your judgments and withholding, it's the same as polluting physically.
You and I mean, we have talked a lot before this call, and we did not discuss this, but one of the bigger goals around the podcast in grief and loss, the analogy I use is that you have environmentalists that clean up the earth, right? They literally are trying to clean up the earth of toxins and trash and pollutants and all of these things. And I think of my work as a therapist as cleaning up the earth around people's pain. It's the same thing, right?
Beautiful.
Cleaning up and moving pain, because we know that that pain creates psychic pollution. It just does. I mean, we can't see it. It's very powerful.
It's a silent, a disease you can't see, that develops it, but it harms. And we know this, you have all these shows now. I mean, to flip it to the spiritual, same thing. You have all these shows, like, I guess a lot of programs with like ghosts, or a lot of celebrities doing the scary haunted house or whatever. So you know that there is a spiritual realm, and you know that something exists in the beyond and all of this. But truly, it's in the earth, it's in the trees. So when I was called by a detective in New Hampshire, DEA, he had heard of me and requested that I help him out on a case that had been closed for a long time. But he felt compelled to continue the search for this young girl whose dad was like the sergeant of the department at the time. And I was able to give him names, which I didn't realize at the time were direct people related to the murder itself, for the young girl. He asked me to come to New Hampshire, and so I went, and I could feel her presence everywhere we were going, where I could see where she was showing me. And we really did get, like I told you, we got to the place where I kept seeing what I was seeing. I kept seeing a dump. I kept seeing the well. I kept, all of these things that I was seeing. And when we got there, there was, debris and trash in the wooded area that wasn't supposed to be a dump. And so he said, well, okay, I guess you could consider this a dump, but, what are we doing? And I kept walking. And at that point, I told you I had a hat on because it was so cold. My hat kept coming off my head in this one spot, and I was really getting irritated. Like, I wanted to kind of shake the tree a little and say, hey, knock it off. Quit pulling my hat off, because it was so cold. And as I grabbed my hat, put it on, I looked out and I saw the cover of a well. And it was, the well. And adjacent to this well was an abandoned foundation that had been burnt down. And Joel said, I can't even believe this. He said, right over there was a home. It was like a little tiny kind of cabin-y thing, like something you would read about. And it was one of the murderers' homes. And 3 weeks after the disappearance of this girl, his house burned down, which most likely, I imagine it was, I'm going to guess it was,
Arson.
Right. Without saying, it was clear. It was just never rebuilt. It was just sort of abandoned, and it grew over wooded from then until now. What he said was that it would be now to completely upheave an entire neighborhood, to get forensics in, to get all kinds of equipment in.
Well, and to put some context around it, she disappeared in 1984, right?
Right.
And then when did this sergeant hire you, and why? Because this was like in 2016, right?
It was 2014 or 15 when he hired me. Yeah.
Why? Why so many years later?
It always just stayed with him. The loss, his wife, or not his wife, but the captain or sergeant, whatever. Well, he had passed away, and it was his daughter. So now this woman is a widow, and her daughter went missing before her husband died.
And never had closure. And
no. And it was crazy because, when it all came down to it, and Joel just wanted it. He wanted so badly closure for this case, for his former boss, for this man's wife. And the only thing that kind of stumped it at the end was, are we going to put thousands and thousands upon thousands of dollars to upheave, driveways and yards? And a brand new neighborhood had been put in
to get underneath this well, right, in 1984.
Yeah, we're talking
so
foundation.
people understand,
Yeah, you have to go through, their foundation to get to where that was, because it had been all, built
So
over.
what
And
happened? So you followed the energy of this young spirit, right? Everyone knows that I believe that spirits live on. And
oh,
so,
what we do? What's the
of
point,
course,
right?
right.
Right. Of course.
So what happened? They weren't going to dig up this foundation. So did they believe you that?
Well, that's the funniest part of all. I felt like we were just like, I'm like, this could be a freaking reality show, because this detective, Joel, he's an amazing man. He didn't believe, but he knew he had to, because he said, you're mentioning things that are, that we have in the vault that no one knows about. That's in this case. No one could know about. And, he had his assistant with him, really funny young guy. He didn't believe either, but after a week or so, or a few days actually in, he was kind of like, hey, can I ask you some questions? So it was like everybody sort of started believing now. And then, which is where like the whole point of what you asked me was, I didn't realize at one point where she took her last breath. I was standing and I didn't know. And I kept saying, this is where it happened. And then I had the physical experience of what happened. I could just, it was horrible. I could feel everything that was in those last moments of what she went through. And it was horrific. It was heartbreaking. It was sad. It was overwhelming. And I kind of became overwhelmed unknowingly that I'm standing in this place. And his assistant said, hold on, look down, you guys, look down. This is 1984, this happened. And you think about it, how much everything has been overgrown, geographically changed.
30 years later. Yeah.
Crazy. And there was a perfect circle around me of dead earth. And I was standing in the middle of it. And Joel
I
just
just got
looked at
chills
me.
everywhere.
Oh, it was, even for me, like I wasn't looking at, I'm not a detective. So I'm not looking at, oh, look at this growth or look at that broken, tree or twig, whatever. I just didn't realize. And he said, oh my God Almighty. He goes, listen, he goes, if I wasn't a believer, I am now. Because that spot where you're standing, where you keep saying she took her last breath, is dead. There, no grass grew. It was all like, looked like bird grass or whatever, like yellow. And it was huge. It was in the shape of a body in this circle. And I'm like, I looked down and I just remember thinking, my heart, I got really tearful for the earth, for the Mother Earth. I'm thinking, she's still holding space for this young woman, 15 years old, who died right here. The earth is still holding space where that suffering took place.
The earth was grieving, right? Like I think about the
And
dead.
look at that energetically.
Wow.
Isn't that wild? Like, we have got to see this as more than that we're consuming from her. We're taking from this beautiful earth and there's no repercussion. Energetically, there's only so much that this earth can, withstand energetically until it's like she just has to get rid of it and start over. And we're taking advantage of that. We really are, by how we treat each other, in that very, I have to say it, we've all in this day and age have become narcissists. And that's the truth. We're only concerned with our well-being, with our own, with our children, with our family, home. Others aren't as important. It doesn't happen to us until it happens to us. And that's what's spilling out. That's the toxin that builds up into what we're dealing with today. And for all the people who've, voted one way, what if that's your child? What if that's you? These judgments are dangerous. And planetary, obviously, because it affects us all.
One of my mantras is always leave people better off than how you found them. And we are so responsible for our own energetic field that we walk around with. So part of my teaching when I would teach clinicians, when I was a clinical director, is before you walk into a family's home, you need to ground yourself and you need to get your energy in check, because whatever condition you're in, when you walk into a home, you can actually create more harm. You can create more chaos within a family. That we are responsible all of the time for the energy that we bring anywhere. If we are negative, take care of it. If we are angry, take care of it. Do not bring it somewhere else and project it all over the place. We're
Right.
human beings. We are going to have these reactions. But one of the things, don't take anything personally, right? One of the
Right.
things that I like to talk about, and I try to practice, I'm human, so I'm super flawed like the rest of us. But if somebody says something to me that triggers me, doesn't matter what it is, say it's my partner, right? Your partner and children are the ones who can really trigger you the most, right? And I feel a reaction, like I want to lash out, get angry. I take a deep breath, because what I'm realizing, if I'm triggered, something is existing inside of me that needs healing.
Right.
It needs healing. But what can happen if we're not aware is now we lash out, right? So now we've got two people who are wounded and they attack each other, and we just create more harm. That's what we do. And so we're human beings, and we have to give ourselves grace
Right.
and become self-aware of what is going on inside and what we are putting out. I feel like that is our journey here, our spiritual journey here
Oh,
on
so
earth.
God, you said that beautifully. That is exactly what it is. And to be the witness. And it's not like you have to become a guru
Right.
or go to India to meditate, which would be lovely, but not everybody can do that. But, it's about learning to truly be the witness, because our thoughts are who we are.
Yes.
And we project them onto others constantly,
Constantly.
whether it's exactly a fear of, this is reminding me of an event, then you have that transference stuff, and you nailed it. It's just before you walk in,
And
clear the fear.
this is why all of the meditation gurus, the meditation is about quieting the mind, because the mind is wrong so often, right? It's reactionary. It's like we're just
Right.
we're reacting to subconscious things that we're not even aware of, our own little soul wounds that we walk around with. That's what meditation is. It's just learning to quiet the mind so you can get to what's true. And what's true is the heart, it's the essence, it's the soul, whatever you want to call it. But
Right.
we are so busy up here all
Oh,
the
it's that competitive thought process that, these events are what it's going to take, whether it's through presidential candidate stuff, or this situation with Roe versus Wade, or these are spiking extremes on a graph, they're not something just neutral with, some conflict. These are huge. This is like watching a volcano erupt or an earthquake, we're watching the scale here. It's like, everybody clear out, the warning signs are coming, and that's what we're doing. We're all in this to stop, because this is the most important thing. And energetically, we have to come together and put our hands on the pain. And it's okay not to know what it is, but just not to see it from that perspective of your ego.
I just had this really powerful image of all of our hands, holding all of our hands and emanating this incredible light. And I think that that is what we're being called to do right now. And I think about when we are in deep grief, it's also the mind, right? It's the memory of the person that we have lost that causes this deep pain. Because when we're in our heart center, energetically, we can feel the people that we've lost, right? Like you and I mean, I've gone to so many readings with you since my brother died, even though I know he's around. It's like, Caroline, I need you to tell me that my brother's here. Because, I mean, that pain comes from, we can't see them, we can't touch them. But yet,
Right.
if we really, again, quiet that mind, we can feel them.
Right. And trust that we're worthy of, which is such a big part of this, of
It's so
having that
huge.
knowledge. At the end of the day, it's that, it doesn't matter what you have or what you don't have. It's that you could have nothing and have the most beautiful life.
Ever.
And the greatest struggles, still the most beautiful life. You could have everything. I'm sure you've seen it with, with some clients, even to have to still be the observer and they can have everything. You can have all the power in the world and still not be fulfilled, to still feel emptiness, to still feel the need to control more. I'm sure it's strange how I perceive it, but I call it a consumer. You're just constantly consuming energy, consuming power, especially in these situations. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of family situations where it's like the breaking of a human, a soul, it's having to abide, God, amazing therapist. Worked with families in divorce situations where she had to make some heavy duty decisions that would alter the lives of these families. And she was amazing and confident, but very humble. And one of the things I think that kind of made her fall apart, or burning out rather, was this kind of power, this heavy duty power and control, when she saw children being forced into situations with abusive parents, well, 50-50,
Wait, what do you mean 50-50?
the custody,
Parents have
But
joint custody. Right.
Right. But if you do have there's an abusive parent who's claiming not to be, whether it's emotional or physical, whatever, there's some clarity here. And the little one's saying, no. The little guys are like, I don't want to go with that. But dad has kind of the power financially, and this is a true story she was explaining to me. And I still can't believe it. Mom supported the kids, the little ones, and said, no, they're not going to dad's for next week. They're not going. And she was thrown in jail and dad got custody. I was like, how could that even happen? But there it is. It's the breakdown of that one person and then the chain events that will happen thereafter, that the power wins, the power and control wins. And so these little ones will grow up now with that shame and also being subservient to some form of power that pollutes the entire universe that we're living in. What happened with this little generation, these children, in other words, who would be grown up now. I'd be fascinated to find out where they are and how are they living. And dad was a tyrant. I mean, they had witnesses and everything. And this particular therapist, she was really emotional with me. And she just said, sometimes you have to give in. And that's what I've learned. And I was in shock. I was like, wow, sometimes you have to give in. I'm like, no, no, that harm belongs to all of us.
Absolutely. 100%.
Not just that woman who went to prison for protecting her children. That shame on all of us then. We carry her shame with us. Unless we rise up together and inconvenience ourselves without care or concern about what anybody else thinks and do the right thing, do what you know is right, regardless.
Even when it's scary.
Right. Even when it's the scariest.
And do it from a place of love and peace. And
absolutely. Neutrality. Not okay. Not okay. And I think of all the situations that have built up, again, that have brought us to this place where we are today, energetically. What are you giving back? What are you taking that doesn't belong to you, but you know it?
Something that came to mind as you were talking, that I think a lot about was this notion of hurt people, right? And so it goes back to moving pain and polluting the earth
Sure.
energetically and all of that. And what's interesting is that we get so angry, like people who are non-Trump supporters hate Trump supporters, etc. Right? So you see, and hate just begets hate. It just does. I mean, love begets love, and hate begets hate, and anger begets anger. And so it's just interesting, when I always think about when we are in this place of hatred or anti anything, we become just that. We become what it is we are hating, right? Because you cannot create more love if you become a vessel of hatred. And so I think about people who cause harm, that those people who are causing harm are the most difficult to love, but they need love the most. It's easy to love lovable people. It is challenging to love unlovable people, right, or people who are so in ego that create this incredible harm. And so I used to talk about, we've got to send Donald Trump or whoever more love. We
Right.
have to hold them in compassion because, as soon as we ask what the hell is wrong with you, what we should be asking is what has happened to you. And so those are the things of how do we create more compassion in love around these people or circumstances that create more harm. Because do you know what I'm trying to say?
You said it. I mean, that's the beginning and the end of all healing. But it's interesting, all I can think of is Ram Dass, who is just one of my greatest gurus ever. And he talked about what is love, and how are we all part of being of service forever together. And it's the judgment of love. It's that, why should I have to share? But there's that ego again. So everything you're saying, it's like, okay, now let's take that jewel and bring it to the next level and observe that love is not what we think it is. It's greater, right? It's embracing everything unconditionally under that umbrella.
And it starts with
Everything.
self. You
Right.
heard when I talk about it, I think most of us just walk around in the self-loathing, which is why we judge so much. It's like, if we could accept ourselves for the pure beauty that we are in all of our flaws, if we really understood how beautiful and perfect we are at our essence, we couldn't be anything but love. We couldn't emanate anything in this world other than love. But we are so judgmental. We are so judgmental of our own self. And when we are full of self-judgment, that's also the only thing that we can emanate is more self-judgment. I mean, the concept is so simple, but the practice is
Beyond our brain,
beyond our
that
brain. Yes.
it's a feeling. And it's a feeling that you're not sending love to the ego of that person or to what you've seen them do that isn't helpful or that's not good. You're not sending love there to continue a bad thing or whatever you want to call it. You're sending love to the core of that person. And there again, what did Jesus say? Forgive them. They know not what they do. It's all
Yes.
about forgiving that soul. Nobody's saying it's okay to do A, B, C, D, and E. That's horrific. Nobody's saying forgive that. The universal laws take care of that. That's why we have them. And if we could understand that, then it would be easy to send love and forgiveness to a soul. When I see you, you see me. I see God, you see God. And we're one and the same.
Yeah. One of my mantras, I am light, I am love, I am God in action. And that's who we all
Oh
are.
my God, that's beautiful.
And that's the mantra I use to remind myself, especially when I'm angry. I am light, I am love, I am God in action. It's a constant reminder of who we are at our essence. And you said something and it made me think of something else. I said this in another podcast because something came to me one day when I thought about being free and what freedom is. And I thought of this idea of flying free. And all of a sudden I thought of this acronym of FLY. Be forgiving, be loving, be you, because that's who we are, right? Be forgiving, be loving, be you, fly free. Freedom lies in love, in our wholeness and in our humanness. And
that beautiful individuality, that
yes,
that perfectly imperfectness. It's the most beautiful thing to see someone embrace their imperfections as that's who I am.
yes,
And then everything is an observation after that. You know, it's just to witness it is a gift for me. And we can all embrace something simple like that. I feel uncomfortable. I feel angry. And it's okay to have those feelings. Just sit with them. Let them tell you why they are where they are for that moment.
and what
You
needs to
know,
heal, what's being triggered, what's the gift in the trigger.
right.
And, one thing this podcast that we've talked a lot about, the trials and tribulations, the deep darkness of grief is an opportunity. Our heart is split wide open and it's an opportunity for us to expand our light in the deep darkness that we feel during grief. I'd
Right.
love, like we're at the top of the hour and I would love to bring this full circle around this idea of the healing that happens in our darkest hour and in grief when the people that we love pass. And I'd love just to hear you talk about this as we kind of bring our conversation to a close.
Blessing everyone, ourselves, as much as we send love and blessings, is equally important in any situation in loss. And God bless ourselves, or universe, or creator, however, to bless ourselves every day that we feel inadequate, to bless ourselves whenever we feel we've wronged somebody or ourselves or a thing, or we weren't kind. To bless ourselves in all of our inadequacies is what's going to break the surface into healing when we understand that we're lovable, we're forgivable, and we're worthy, and we're important. And here in this very moment, for every reason important that we're even unaware of. And those who've crossed over, whether we understand and there was no goodbyes, or whether there was no time to check in to say hello, or we ignored a call, it was all for purpose is intended. That's all it ever was. And that everyone's always here who's crossed over, and we do our work on the other side. And that at the end of the day, the sun shines in the brightest light of love and forgiveness and self-worth. I can't say that as much as I could every day is, oh, you know what? I accept blessings and forgiveness for being short and short-sighted, and for making really poor decisions, and for being rude or mean, or telling that person to bug off in traffic. That is what will develop discipline and mindfulness to peaceful freedom within.
So on that note, I always end with one final question, and that is, what does self-love look like for you? What does it look like? Make it tangible.
What does self-love look like?
For you?
Seeing every aspect of every little experience, which we all have our own little, whether it's from childhood, when you stole a crayon or something, from your brother or your sister or something. Oh God. It's forgiving yourself for not knowing better. And that's where self-worth for me comes from. When I can love myself in every color, from love to blame and shame, all the spectrum of fear, of being judged. For all those moments, I'm choosing to play God in my own mind. And I send love back to that place. I will know my self-worth more and more every day. And it happens like in nature, it just evolves inside of you. It's not something where you have to continually say it or write it down, or, firmly, that's the ego, right? If I don't say it 10 times a day, like it says in this book, or spiritual, enlightenment, that isn't true. What is it? It's the trap. And the ego sets lots of traps for us to break free from. That's the gift. So I think when we can send forgiveness and love back to ourselves every day, and just take time to evaluate your thoughts. I love and forgive myself for that thought. I love and forgive myself for wanting to be angry at the neighbor for their, barking dog, or your self-worth just, it's like the tree of life. It grows inside of you until you become it. You can't not, because you are. And so
Yes.
that's how I see my self-worth, is for every inadequacy I believe I have, I send love and forgiveness to that place for not knowing better. And then I feel, immensely better and confident about the choices that I'm making.
God, that was so beautiful. Caroline, thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom and your light. And I'm gonna have you back on this show, because I feel like we're scraping the tip of the iceberg right now. Can you tell people where they can find you? We'll have it in the show notes as well. Do you have Instagram channel? If people want to hire you for a reading or as a life coach, what's the best way to go about doing that?
So right now, as I'm in the process stages of kind of building all of that platform for myself, I say my email or Facebook. A lot of people have found me through Facebook. And then, of course, Star Gypsy 777 at Gmail. I feel like a cowboy, right now. The old West, flying by the seat of my pants.
I think it's fantastic. I hope all of you, our listeners, are feeling just a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit calmer after this conversation with Caroline today. And I wish you all love and light. And thank you for tuning in. And we'll see you next
Thank
week.
you for having me, Susan.
Bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. If you enjoyed this episode of Leap, please subscribe, share it with others, or leave a rating and review so others can benefit from this content. Be sure to check out the show notes for resources related to this episode. And to catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at susan.casey. If you have a transformational story to share on grief and loss, please email me at leapwithsusan@gmail.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.